Hello and welcome to another episode of the FemiNinja Project. And thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. And I have a lovely guest with me today, and we're going to talk about happiness and how we can all achieve it for the rest of our lives. Her name is Karyn Seitz, and she is a teacher and thought leader in happiness, as well as women empowerment. And you know we love that on the show. She describes the state of being happy as a deep sense of inner fulfillment, and where you feel at peace with yourself and your life, no matter what your circumstances. Karyn is the happiness expert, and her joy in life is teaching women a simple roadmap to lasting happiness and deep fulfillment. She offers an online course called Awakened Grace, which is a happiness program for women to empower them to heal their relationship with themselves to be happy and live their best life. Karyn, thank you so much for being here and welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Cheryl. It's always wonderful to be here and to have these conversations and get to share my story and message and hopes of helping other women and anybody listening. So thank you so much.
Oh, you are welcome. And I just love the topic about happiness because I think there's so much unhappiness and so much,
Yeah.
dissension and depression, and everything just kind of feels heavy these
Mm.
days.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a topic that is always relevant and a topic that has been the million-dollar question since the beginning of time of
Mhm,
what is happiness. And quite frankly, just from my own journey and working with many other people, as humans, we don't really understand happiness. We have a lot of misinformation out there. And it's very exciting to have a universal path to happiness that
mhm.
is accessible to everybody. So I think it's always relevant to be talking about. Um, and I love being able to give a roadmap and a definition and an understanding of happiness that
Mhm.
applies everywhere.
So we're all chomping at the bit now, wanting to know what that roadmap is
Right?
and wanting to know what true happiness is. I
Mhm.
think a lot of us know what true happiness is not. It's
Yeah.
not pursuing things and, like, property or external type of things that we think will make us happy. That beautiful dress, that new car, that job that we've always wanted, or a relationship where we have a partner that can make us happy.
Mm. Yeah, it's certainly not any of those things. What's fascinating and what I had to learn really on my own journey is that it, our pursuit of happiness can show up in a lot of different ways. And
Mhm,
what I've discovered, Cheryl, and what I can see in my life journey and looking at others in the pursuit and in the search of happiness is that our whole human existence and our whole human experience is
mhm,
really getting caught in the trap of the
mhm,
pursuit of happiness, and that
mhm,
in itself, whether, and I'm sure I'll share more about this. For me, it was my spiritual journey, was my
mhm,
pursuit of happiness and all the different paths and routes that I took, really seeking answers, really seeking myself, seeking happiness, coming up
mhm,
empty again and again and again and again, and just going around in circles, whether it is pursuing different roles and relationships in life, like getting married or having children, or pursuing our dream career, or
mhm,
pursuing promotions and advancements in our career, or a certain financial status or certain financial stability, or having the dream home, or having, what's popular these days is the time freedom to travel and work from anywhere. Our
mhm,
pursuit of happiness shows up in all these different ways. And that very pursuit is what's letting us know that we are unhappy, because no
mhm,
matter how we disguise it, any of those things I just mentioned, no matter what goal we have or what we're telling ourselves why we're pursuing that, we're
mhm,
pursuing something that we think we don't have, that if
mhm,
once we had it, that we would finally feel fulfilled and feel that our lives have meaning and that we've hit the top and we've gotten everything in order. And that's
mhm,
the very thing that keeps us actually unhappy.
mhm,
And how I define unhappy is always wanting what we don't have. Always
mhm,
wanting what we don't have is the experience of being unhappy. And I think if we're willing to get honest with ourselves, and take a flashlight out and look at our life journey, we can see the decisions and the routes that we take in our life that are actually showing us that we're unhappy and going after these things that we think will complete us and be the thing to make us happy.
I love the way you said that about the taking out that flashlight and taking a really close look at your life and your life journey.
Mhm.
And I have to tell you that it also sounds like it's absolutely terrifying.
Mm.
And, because who knows when you pull that flashlight out and turn it on, what you're going to see and what you're going to find.
Yeah.
So tell us how you started on
Mhm.
your journey to happiness, and, what was the catalyst, or what was what was it that pursued you or made you realize, I am not happy and I've got to change the way I'm looking at my life, or the way I'm
Mhm.
looking at happiness per se.
Sure. So what I love most, Cheryl, about really the focus of your podcast and your show is really around overcoming challenges and the
Mhm.
obstacles we overcome in life and what that teaches us and what that opens up for us. And myself, like many others, was at a place in my life where I was younger. I was 25, 26, and it felt like at that point my my whole existence was really just suffering. Um, and I hit a point in my 20s where I was so self-destructive, had many failed relationships by 25, 26,
Wow.
really had no clue who I was. And I often say it as I didn't know how to have my adult feet underneath me, and I didn't know how to function as an
Mhm.
adult in my life. And I had a lot of story
Mhm.
about why that was. And I had a lot of experiences that um, life had brought me and that I had gone through in my life. I had
Mhm.
a past and an upbringing just like everybody else. And I had a lot of stories about why I struggled so much and why I suffered so much in my early adulthood that I was so stuck. So I started out in a very traditional path of going to talk therapy. That was
Mhm.
my first hack at trying to figure myself out, trying to figure happiness out. And at a certain point, probably a couple years in, I wanted something more. And I had a good friend of mine who studied shamanism, which is an indigenous practice of connecting with what's called the spirit world or the unseen world for guidance
Mhm.
and healing. And that was my first step into the spiritual path and to this path of seeking, desperately trying to find myself, but really not in the moment I couldn't see it, but really looking in all the wrong places for
Mhm.
me. And that went on um till I was 31. And I went all in. I studied shamanism and studied under a shamanic practitioner and
Mhm.
healer to learn to heal myself, but also learn to practice shamanism with other people. I became a yoga teacher. I became
Mhm.
a meditation teacher. I even got a college degree in holistic health. I was a Reiki master, like you name
Oh.
it, I did it. I had we talked about this briefly before the show started. I had every book under the sun that anyone told me to get or that I found on my own, trying to really figure myself out and figure life out, which all culminated in having a healing practice and having others come to me to help them heal. And I hit a
Mhm.
point when I was about 31 where I call it my 30 something crisis, where I was doing all this work on myself. I was reading all the books. I had a healing practice. Yet I still felt, even though I wore the facade of I've got it all
Mhm.
together, I understand life, I know what I'm doing, I'm helping others, like I'm this spiritually enlightened person. That was the facade I wore on the outside. But on the inside, I still felt very insecure. I
Mhm.
describe it as I felt like a little girl and trapped inside of a woman's body,
Mhm.
no confidence, and yet trying to keep up this facade that I had it all together and that I was knew what I was doing in my life. And
Did
that's
you feel like an imposter as you were doing that?
oh yeah, I can remember, Cheryl, when and I think it's important to say too, my intentions were very good, and I think
Of
anybody
course, yeah.
who worked with me in that short time period has wonderful things to say about me. I think up until a couple years ago, I would still have former clients reach out to me and ask me if I was still doing intuitive readings,
Hmm.
asking if I was still teaching yoga or doing Reiki healing, and why I had the most profound experiences with you. Yet for me on the inside, I felt like a total imposter because my
Wow.
life was a mess. I
Hmm.
still felt like a mess on the inside. And I had people coming to me trying to get answers and healing. And I can remember, Cheryl, before people coming in to work with me, I can remember the anxiety
Hmm.
I would feel and the trepidation and the fear of like, can I really help this person? Not to
Hmm.
mention doing intuitive readings and like, am I really gonna like get insight for this person?
Hmm.
It was an immense amount of pressure because truth be told, what I came to find is that I wasn't in my truth, that those
Hmm.
things were not my path to
Hmm.
healing and they were not the path to happiness. And
Hmm.
that's when I met my mentors
Hmm.
who opened up a whole new world for me by really helping me to see, and something that the other things I was doing did not help me to see. But
Hmm.
they really helped me to see two really, 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 really important things. That
Hmm.
one, I was the problem in my life. It was not my past trauma. It was not my childhood. It was not my parents. It was not my husband. It was not the failed relationships. It wasn't anything outside of me. I was the problem in my life that I was so stuck. And number two is that my answers were not in other people. My answers were not
Hmm.
in the healers. My answers were not in the books. My answers were not out there in the world, that my answers were in me, and that the way to happiness and the way to understanding myself, the way to having meaning and purpose was to actually build a relationship with myself. And
Hmm.
what I began to see is that what I was doing on my spiritual path, I was doing anything and everything to avoid
Hmm.
myself and become something more
Hmm.
than who I am.
I just want to go back a little bit because I find it fascinating that, and I understand the anxiety and the fear when you're getting clients coming, to see
Mhm.
you for help. I certainly can relate to that. But I find it so fascinating that, you felt like this imposter, but yet you were really helping your clients. I
Mhm.
mean, they were getting results.
Well, I I think actually it's important to know that I couldn't, while they found support and they found what was meaningful to them and what they were doing, just like in all the things I was doing at that time, that
Hmm.
was my truth. That's
Hmm.
what I knew. But as I started to see, oh, it's unnatural for me to find my answers outside of me.
Hmm.
And the things I was doing were actually getting me off track of being true to myself. I wasn't being true to myself in my healing
Hmm.
practice. I couldn't see it while I was in it, but
Right.
hindsight afterwards, I could see I wasn't true to myself. So,
Hmm.
do I think that those people found help and support in what I was doing? Yes, because I did too. But
Hmm.
were they getting results of lasting change
Hmm.
and lasting healing in their lives? No, they weren't.
Okay. And then my next question for you was when you found those two reasons that
Hmm.
actually it was within yourself that,
Hmm.
the healing would happen within yourself and that you were the one that was the problem.
Yeah.
What was your reaction? Was it like, I can't believe I'm doing this to myself? Or was it liberating
Mhm.
because, okay, now I've got control? Or was it terrifying because it was like, okay, so now I've got to figure this out?
Sure. Well, it was totally relieving
Mm,
because from me and in my experience of therapy and the different healers I worked with, everything was always guided, meaning the issues I had in my life. Let's say my insecurity, my feeling of having a lack of having no voice, my feelings
mhm,
of inadequacy, feeling like I wasn't enough, all the things we struggle with, which are actually the symptoms of being unhappy.
Mm-hmm.
And especially, I believe, as women and myself being a woman, we really struggle with a sense of inadequacy and feeling less than and feeling
Mm-hmm.
disconnected and feeling that we're not enough. And that's the experience of being unhappy. When I would go to therapy and I would go to different healers, the problem with that is that all the issues I was having, the insecurity, lack of confidence, not enough, less than, were always pointed to some person or experience that had happened to me that was outside of me. So, I did a lot of woo-woo stuff. So, so it would be things like even my past lives and things
Mm-hmm.
that had happened to me before I came into this life, and my consciousness came into a new life, and it was, I mean, you name it. I had a story for everything about the problems and the issues that I had.
Mm-hmm.
And that was what kept me spinning around in circles and trapped in my stories of what I thought had happened to me in my life
Mm-hmm.
that was preventing me from getting better and preventing me from moving forward in my life. And what I came to realize is that I was the biggest obstacle in my life. So at this time that I was seeing these healers and therapists, and they were pointing me to things outside of me of why I had these issues. And no harm on their end. They meant well
Right.
too. I was craving somebody to bust me in my stories. So it was very refreshing and very empowering and very much an awakening
Mm-hmm.
to be told I was the problem. It wasn't an experience of, oh my gosh, I'm this terrible, awful, awful person. What
Mm-hmm.
am I doing to myself? It was a thank goodness I'm the problem, because I know that somewhere in me. I just needed somebody to call me out in that way
Mm-hmm.
and then guide me in a constructive way to see the choices and decisions I had been making in my life that were creating the very life that I had. So it was
Mm-hmm.
very empowering, very refreshing,
Mm-hmm.
and very relieving to be told and then to see for myself through my own experience
Mm-hmm.
that I was the problem in my life.
And then at that point, did you pivot your strategy in finding your path to happiness?
Ooh.
Was finding happiness ever the goal, or was it
Yeah.
just getting me out of the quagmire of
Yeah.
my own mind and my own,
Sure.
experiences, and just trying to find a new way of
Yeah.
looking at your life and looking at
Yeah.
things? And did you just kind of did you I don't want to say fire, or did you eliminate all of the other therapists and other
Yeah,
people?
of course. Yeah. Yeah. Everything got flipped on its head. Once
Mhm,
I had that, because it was a deep awakening moment. It wasn't me reading something in a book that was like, oh, that makes so much sense. And like,
mhm,
okay, great. That's fun for a little bit. Now on to the
mhm,
next thing. It was a deep, deep experience in knowing in myself that what I was starting to understand and see was
mhm,
truth. So
mhm,
there was a deep connection to that.
mhm,
And then I couldn't go back.
mhm,
I couldn't, there was nothing in me. And I struggled with that for a little bit because I had just spent years, I had a healing practice. I had
mhm,
invested a lot of money and invested a lot of time. This is how the people in my life, my family, my friends, my clients, my colleagues, and peers knew me. And
mhm.
everything got flipped on its head. And I realized it was a deep awakening of this is not the path for me any longer. Like
Uh-huh.
I can't try to go back. And it was very freeing because there was a part of me that also knew I was trying on all these different hats. But if I was still trying on all these different hats, it meant I hadn't really found me and I hadn't
Mhm,
found what was right for me, or I wouldn't be trying on all the different healing modalities and continuing to seek. So
mhm,
I flipped my practice very quickly. Like very, very quickly. I could no longer have people come to me for answers,
mhm,
because I knew how unhealthy that was for me and how off track that got me
mhm,
in my life. And I got rid of my books. I stopped seeing my therapist. I stopped seeing my different healers, because once I formed that deep initial connection to myself, I
Mhm.
knew I was on the right path for me and I needed to keep
Mhm.
going in this direction. In
Mhm.
terms of, was it ever about happiness? It was always about happiness. It
Mhm.
was always about finding meaning and purpose in my life. But just like all of us as humans stuck in that pursuit of happiness and not even realizing it,
Mhm.
I didn't realize that in the time that what I was doing
Mhm.
in my spiritual path was a pursuit of
Mhm.
feeling happy and fulfilled and meaningful in myself and in my life. I
Okay,
just
so
wanted to fix what I
mhm.
thought was wrong with me.
Two comments, kind of questions. When you eliminated all of the healers, therapists, and blah, 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 blah. So my first question would be, how did they react? Did anybody say, oh
Mm.
my gosh, but you need me to help
Hmm.
you, blah, blah, blah? And then the other thing is, once you did make that decision and you did fire all of those other helpers and you started to pursue this path, did you discover that you liked yourself more?
Mm. Yeah, good question. So I wouldn't say that, it wasn't a process, and I understand where you're coming from in the wording of firing. I think for me,
Mm-hmm.
it was just kind of a gradual, I'm not scheduling any more appointments. I
Got it.
I do remember talking with one of my shamanic teachers, and she was wonderful. She really supported me in finding my
Mm-hmm.
path and really kind of
Oh,
took a
nice.
step back, and I felt no guilt and there was no pressure of, no, you need this, you're off
Mm-hmm.
track. It was trust yourself
Mm-hmm.
and your path and your journey.
Nice.
So that was a really, really good transition. And the whole journey of happiness, and I think it's really important to understand, especially the challenges that we have as women, and the challenges that we all have as humans, that the journey of happiness is really slowing down and learning how to build a relationship with yourself. It's
Mm-hmm.
really learning how to connect with who you are and accepting yourself for who you are and accepting the life you have and the challenges that you have in your life, and understanding that our life has been created through our choices, and that
Mm-hmm.
there's nothing holding us back other than ourselves. And
Mm-hmm.
so the only way that we can like ourselves is to begin to connect with ourselves and accept ourselves for our shortcomings, for our
Mm-hmm.
weaknesses, understanding that those things don't make us bad or wrong,
Mm-hmm.
that those are our opportunities to really understand ourselves so that we can outgrow our limitations.
Mm-hmm.
So it's counterintuitive to us that seeing ourselves in our flaws, seeing ourselves in our shortcomings, the
Mm-hmm.
decisions we've made that have created a life that we feel stuck in, or the choices we make that devalue who we are and give us the message that we are unimportant. The process of understanding yourself in that way is the journey to liking
Mm-hmm.
yourself.
Mm-hmm.
I really, really, really didn't like myself
Mm-hmm.
ever in life.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't like myself on my spiritual journey, although I would have told you I love myself. My whole
Mm-hmm.
spiritual journey is learning to love myself.
Mm-hmm.
But I can see now, no, it wasn't, because I still hated who I saw when I looked in the mirror. And I
Mm-hmm.
was trying to become somebody more. I was trying to become in my experience and how I describe it, I was trying to become some supremely enlightened being and trying to become like I would have called it the highest version of me,
Mm-hmm.
which meant that I didn't want anything to do with me. I wanted to
Mm-hmm.
bypass me and become again some enlightened spiritual version of me, which also led me to having a really big ego and isolating myself from
Mm-hmm.
anyone in my life that I deemed as negative or in my way on that journey to enlightenment. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I was terrible to my husband, and was constantly judging him and telling him what he needed to be doing in his
Oh.
life. So who I was being to other people was not anyone with integrity, character, or kindness. And I felt really
Mhm.
bad about myself on the inside, which is the experience of being unhappy. When we feel
Mhm.
bad about ourselves and we don't value ourselves, that's why we always want what we don't have. It's not
Mhm.
what's going on in our lives or what we have or don't have in our lives. It's what's going on inside of us. That's the
Mhm.
problem.
Well, it's also putting an incredible amount of pressure on yourself when you want to be this, supremely enlightened person who's,
It
like at
is.
the top of the enlightenment pyramid. I
Oh,
mean,
100%.
to me, that would be a heck of a climb up that pyramid. And I would imagine it's awfully slippery on the way up
Yeah,
too. And how many
constant
times,
pressure.
yeah, as you were climbing up that ladder or pyramid, did you slide and fall
Mhm.
off and end up at the bottom going, looking back up at it, going, do I really want to do this?
Yeah, it was constant pressure. Um, and it also pushed me into this false belief, and I see this a lot with the women I work with, just observing life and
Mm-hmm.
observing, society, and especially observing those of us who have been seekers in our
Mm-hmm.
life and who maybe are on a path towards enlightenment or spiritual awakening or however you might call that
Mm-hmm.
anyone for themselves is that I felt under this false belief that I needed to never have any negative experiences or negative emotions. So the pressure was always trying to keep up this facade that I had it all together and that nothing fazed me and I could stay zen and peaceful no matter what life brought my way and was totally disconnected from
Mm-hmm.
reality that no, that's not sustainable. That's not
Mm-hmm.
what happiness is.
Mm-hmm.
And the point of us growing and learning about ourselves isn't to get to a place where we don't have negative emotions or negative reactions. That's a
Mm-hmm.
really, really great way to spiritually bypass, which is what I call what I did. Never having to look at myself, never really having to resolve any emotional turmoil in me. And it's a really great way to disconnect from yourself and never have any idea what's going on with you.
Well, even the term negative emotions right there, just right there out
Hmm.
of the gate is like this is a bad thing. And like anger is a quote unquote negative emotion.
Hmm.
To me, anger is really fun in some ways because it's a way of expressing yourself as long as you're doing it in a healthy way. But you can't deny your emotions. And once again, I would
Hmm.
think that the pressure would be enormous.
Yeah.
And I'm just getting the image of a pressure cooker that you're trying under every circumstances or every circumstance, no matter what happens to you in life, be it something really huge or somebody just cutting you off in traffic, that you have to be zen and calm.
Yeah.
You really kind of want to take a baseball bat to somebody's head, but that's
Yeah. Yeah.
not that anybody that I'm advocating you do it, but
Yeah.
sometimes that's just what it feels like.
Yeah. Well, an interesting thing, since you brought it up, I think this is a good direction into the main message I really want to get across in my story and to help the listeners is that anger, well, one of the anger just brought this up to talk about, but one of the main paths to overcoming my challenges, and like I
Mm-hmm.
said, my biggest obstacle was me
Mm-hmm.
and how I was my biggest obstacle. And I never would have told you this on my spiritual journey. I would have like been appalled, like, no, me, no. Is that I was a huge victim. And when I use the word victim, I mean victim mentality.
Mm-hmm.
Every problem in my life, everything I didn't
Mm-hmm.
like about myself could be attributed to someone else or some experience in my life,
Mm-hmm.
which was always pointing the finger out and causing me to blame. And I
Mm-hmm.
didn't realize how pervasive for myself and for all of us as humans, how pervasive victim mentality is because of how our mind works and how we're wired in our humanness, which our first instinct when we're having a challenge or an issue in our life isn't to look at ourselves and see
Mm-hmm.
what are the choices and decisions I have made that have led me to this experience or circumstance in my life. Or how am I handling this hardship or curveball in my life and reacting to it that's causing me to have this experience? That's not our
Mhm.
natural instinct. Our natural
Mhm.
instinct is to look outside of ourselves to see who or what has happened to me that has
Mhm.
taken away something I deserve or I'm entitled to, that's giving
Mhm.
me a life of struggle and
Mhm.
hardship. That's our natural experience as a
Mhm.
human. And I call that being a victim. And being
Mhm.
a victim is that's for me where I understand that's where anger stems from,
Mhm.
is that I'm having a reaction because I believe something is happening to me in life. And that's a really good experience to have, because then that's
Mhm.
my doorway in to look at
Mhm.
myself. And victim led me to really see, and this is the main message that I want listeners to hear, is that the simplest way to change is to change yourself. And
Mhm.
as a victim in my life and living in victim mentality, I was always trying to change the people and circumstances in my life, that
Mhm.
they were the problem. And by understanding that I needed to work on me and that I was the problem in my life, it led me to see
Mhm.
that I was the common denominator in all my
Mhm.
life's experiences, in all of my relationships, and all of the problems and challenges that I had in my life. I was the one constant, which meant it
Mhm.
wasn't all those different things that were the problem. It was me. And that
Mhm.
was my fast track to transformation and my fast track to finding meaning and purpose
Mhm.
in myself, was examining me and my choices and decisions that were
Mhm.
creating my life and creating my circumstances, and really understanding I can't change anyone. I can't
Mhm.
change my past. I can't change anything except
Mhm.
for myself, and that it made a lot more sense to really start working on my choices and decisions
Mhm.
and building that relationship with me, and stop trying to change or work on other people. And
Mhm.
as I did that, everything changed. Every relationship that I had
Mhm.
completely changed and transformed. And they didn't change. I did. And
Mhm.
that has been a wonderful, wonderful gift on this journey, is the more I work on me, the more I build a relationship with myself and solely look to me
Mhm.
in the problems and challenges in my life, every relationship continues to grow and get
Mhm.
better, or I continue to grow and get better in that relationship and navigate it in a way where I feel good about myself and I'm being
Mhm.
true to myself.
Mhm. I want to talk about the victim mentality a little bit more because, as you said, the victim mentality is it's pervasive.
Pervasive.
And I think it's actually also very seductive because I think that society kind of either promotes or exacerbates or feeds into that victim mindset and supports the fact that, oh, you are a victim. And I think a lot of people fall into that trap. It's, if they want to break out of that victim mentality, there's always somebody, whether it's a friend or a therapist or somebody, you really love and trust, saying, oh, yes, you've been mistreated. Oh, yes, you should be angry about that. Oh, yes, rather than being able to flip the switch, you're constantly being bombarded with these messages of victimology, even through media and society. So how do you encourage people to be able to recognize that so that they can flip the script and
Mhm.
get out of that victim mentality and go from victim to victor?
Yeah, well, I think what's really important is it, and it's true in what you're saying, Cheryl. We can look at our society and we can see victim everywhere, and we can see it being enabled
Mm-hmm.
within different systems and within different ideals within our society and within our culture. And the reason for that is because that's our humanness. Our I like to explain from understanding the mind, which I define differently than the brain, that our human brain has the capacity to create what I call the mind. And the
Mm-hmm.
mind is completely externally focused. So the mind creates a self through our
Mm-hmm.
external world, which is
Mm-hmm.
then the very reason that we live in victim, because anytime we go through something or we have a challenge or we're stuck in some way in our lives, the mind is wired to immediately look outside of us for the problem. So the reason we see that so rampant within our society and culture
Mhm.
is because that is how we are wired as humans. So of course, our human structures and how we conduct ourselves in life and in our society is very much centered around victim. And that's probably the
Mhm.
first place that a lot of my clients begin to see victim
Mhm.
is one, I'm teaching them to see it in themselves, but then they inevitably begin to see when somebody else is being a victim and pointing the
Mhm.
finger out and blaming somebody else. Um, and that's probably the first place we want to see, oh, they're being a victim, they're being such a victim. So I bring it back to my clients of it's not important to see it in other people.
Mhm.
And if you're seeing it in other people, that's because you have it in yourself. I can't
Mhm.
experience anything in somebody else that I don't have in me. And if I'm
Mhm.
really bothered by it and really annoyed by it or judgmental of it, that's because it's in me and I don't want to see it. So the very
Mhm.
first step in really overcoming victim is that you have to know you are a victim. And I don't mean
Mhm.
victim of a crime or victim of abuse,
Mhm.
but to see, yes, I respond to life as a victim, that something is happening to me that's causing me to have this problem. And even if I can just see it in one little area, say somebody's seeing it in their career and they're always
Mhm.
blaming their boss or they're blaming their coworkers for a negative, toxic work environment. If
Mhm.
you can see it even in that small place, then that means that is you and that's how you conduct yourself in your life. And that's a really, really empowering thing to see in
Mhm.
oneself. It was very empowering to me because then that actually gave me the pathway and opened the pathway to be able to change and to
Mhm.
be able to make other choices and decisions to actually have the outcomes I wanted in my life. Because as
Mhm.
long as I was a victim and pointing the finger out, there was no ability to change because now
Mhm.
I've given my power away to somebody or something else to
Mhm.
change my experience. And that's futile, very short-lived, very
Mhm.
fleeting. And then we're always coming up with some other issue or problem that's happening that we can't move forward or that we can't get unstuck. So seeing yourself as a victim and
Mhm.
welcoming that and normalizing it and not making it wrong or bad because it's such a pejorative word in
Mhm.
our society. And we think all kinds of things when we hear the word victim. And the last thing anybody wants to know themselves, especially if you're a spiritual seeker like I was, the last thing you want to know or see about yourself is that you're a victim. But that's
Mhm.
the first step to really getting to know yourself and having a connection to yourself because it's your pathway in to making it internal rather
Mhm.
than everything being external.
So basically, like most things, the first step is admitting that you have a
Yeah.
problem.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. And that problem is being a victim in life.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I love that the way that you brought the word empowerment, because when you are in that victim mentality, you are giving your power to the other person
You
that you
are.
perceive is causing your victimization. And once you can make that cut, it's like you actually take your power back.
Yeah. Yeah. Seeing yourself as a victim. And
Mhm.
the opposite of being a victim to me is becoming a grown-up adult and no longer looking to put your problems and issues on somebody or something else or something in your past, but being willing
Mhm.
to go within and be a grown-up adult and choose how you respond to life, do
Mhm.
the things that make you feel good about yourself, and be the solution to your problems.
Mhm.
That seeing yourself as a victim and how much you give your power away in that, blaming others
Mhm.
is incredibly powering and it is the path to take your power back because again, the only person you can change is yourself. So I would say 99% of the people that I have worked with and in the hundreds by now with this model really don't want to see themselves as a victim. They're open to it
Mhm.
and they'll go there because I have to work with somebody who's open-minded to see
Mhm.
these things in themselves. And the
Mhm.
process is not painful. It's quite enlightening and fun in
Mhm.
its weird way. But everybody like feels guilty or like, oh God, I'm a bad person, that I'm a victim. And one of the other first things I do is normalize it, to know, no, this is our human experience. That's why you see it so rampant in our society and culture.
Mhm.
It's our humanness. Everybody has it. Maybe some to more a degree than another, but we all have it.
Mhm.
And once we can crack that door and begin to see it and how it plays out in our own lives, that's the doorway to freedom.
Mhm. Okay, so now we're talking about, since you mentioned the words enlightenment and fun in the same sentence, and solutions to all of our problems, I would love to hear how you, because I first of all, I want to know, did you really throw away 250 self-help books?
Truly,
And
truly.
truly, truly. And so I'm wondering, was it a ceremonial thing? Did you have like this book
Yeah.
burning, or did you pack them all up and dump them in a
Yeah.
library? Or what made you decide to throw away 250 self-help books?
Yeah, it kind of circles back to what I was talking about earlier in our conversation, Cheryl, that once I realized my answers weren't outside of me, and that one,
Mm-hmm,
I was the answer I was
mm-hmm,
searching for, and that any other answer to life or understanding of myself or life wasn't outside of me, it was in me.
mm-hmm,
Um, I also began to see that a lot of the books I was reading and the teachers I were following weren't living what they were teaching, and they weren't, how do I say that? They weren't correct in
that
what
is
they were
really
teaching.
interesting.
And the reason I can know that, I don't mean that in a egotistical way
Mm-hmm,
or anything. One, I was doing my best to follow what they were saying, and yet I was still going in circles in my life. And
mm-hmm.
the people around me who were on the same paths were still stuck and going in circles in life.
Wow.
And I had to make a decision. Either what I was learning and what they were teaching me, I wasn't doing it right,
Mm-hmm,
or what they were teaching me didn't work.
mm-hmm,
And I chose the latter, that,
mm-hmm,
well, it doesn't work, and that's okay, and that's not bad, and that's their truth for them and where they are, but it didn't work for me.
mm-hmm,
And once I began to really understand things like authenticity
mm-hmm,
and understanding how to actually connect with myself and
mm-hmm,
understanding what happiness is and
mm-hmm,
how to find meaning and purpose in me, I realized those weren't the books that I had and the things I was reading weren't it, because now I knew it experientially.
mm-hmm,
Before I just knew things conceptually and
mm-hmm,
in an information type way, like a gathering information. What I
mm-hmm,
teach now and what I learned through my own process and journey and continue to learn
mm-hmm,
is very experiential, meaning
mm-hmm,
I have to actually experience it and live it in my life before I can know it as true and
mm-hmm,
actually teach it and share it with others. So I learned there's a lot of, and this is not meant to, again, not to be pejorative or bad or wrong.
mm-hmm,
There's a lot of false teachers out there
mm-hmm,
who claim that they know these things and they're doing these things
mm-hmm,
in their lives, but it's clear they're not because of the
mm-hmm,
struggles and challenges that they continue to have and run up
mm-hmm,
against. And that was freeing to begin to know I could start to discern
mm-hmm,
who was living what they were teaching or not.
mm-hmm,
And then I didn't want to read. Once I found me, I guess this is the big thing. Once I found me, I had no desire to read all the books anymore
mm-hmm,
because I was reading all those books. And I think what we don't realize as seekers is we're seeking ourselves. And
mm-hmm.
I wasn't in the books. Like I could read all the books, but I wasn't going to find me in those books. I
Mm-hmm,
was in me. So once I really started to connect with me, which is a journey through life, and really get to know
mm-hmm,
me and begin to realize I could find my own answers and I could begin to know
mm-hmm,
myself and what I thought and believed based on my own critical thinking and understanding and connection to me. I didn't want to read the books anymore.
mm-hmm,
I hadn't, it was like the craving. I had an addiction to self-help books. I'm not exaggerating. It was like I think my husband at some point was like, how many more Amazon packages of books are we going to get? How many more books are you going to read about how to improve
Mhm.
yourself? Very supportive and
Mhm.
good, but it was a lot. Um, but once I found me, and I didn't have any reason to seek anymore, and that was so freeing and people
Mhm.
and so nice. So it was a process of going through and feeling the loss of that part of me,
Mhm.
um, so that I wasn't just throwing the books out and like just shutting the door.
Mhm.
It was a process of really letting go of that part of me. But it happened pretty quickly. And then there were some books I wasn't quite ready to let go of, and
Mhm.
then I was ready, and so I let go of them. And I haven't bought a self-help book in over 8 years. The only time I've bought one is to see, like, is that what this person is talking about, is it truth? And
Mhm.
any book that or to research something because I'm going to give a talk or
Mhm.
something like that, and it's like I can't even read it.
Mhm.
It's like it's like somebody has a whisk inside my
Oh no.
brain, and it's like I use the word scramble.
Yeah.
Now I know when I read something and I get that sensation in my head,
Mhm.
and I've had students and people that I've talked with like, oh, I know that experience.
Yeah.
Whenever I get that sensation, then I know the person and what they're putting out there isn't in their truth,
Mhm.
and that's why it has that effect. So that's a little bit on the books.
Okay, so I have a kind of a frivolous and fun kind of question for you regarding that. What do you have on those bookshelves now? Because you probably freed up an awful lot of
Yeah, I don't
shelf
have any book.
space.
Yeah, my husband and I, we have one bookshelf. I enjoy memoirs,
Hmm.
and biographies. So there's some memoirs and biographies there. And my husband, is an outdoors guy and loves hiking and exploring our beautiful, country in Colorado here. And so there's a lot of mountaineering and hiking books and things like that. So yeah, and then we have one small little bookshelf.
Nice.
Cookbooks.
Nice. Cookbooks.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I love
Yeah,
those.
cookbooks, but no self-help books there.
Excellent. Excellent. I love that because I know I went through that self-help phase too. It's like there's got to be an answer in here somewhere,
Yeah, I
you
know,
know.
right?
Yeah, and I
Yeah,
spent a small fortune on
we do.
it.
And then we can regurgitate these great sound bites. But what
Yeah,
I
yeah,
realized is I didn't know how to live those great sound bites. I
yeah,
didn't know them as myself experientially. So that's why for a while it'd be like I would just regurgitate these
yeah.
things, but there was no follow through.
Yeah, it sounded good in theory, but in practice, it just kind of didn't work.
Totally fell apart.
Exactly. So, tell us about Awakened Grace. I love
Yeah,
the name because I love the
thank
thought of,
you.
I mean, it says it all. I love, the grace part of it and that awakened grace because I think we all have it deep inside of us. And a lot of times we just let it lie there dormant.
Yeah, yeah. So Awakened Grace, is my happiness program for women. And it is a 10-week program, that there's really two main purposes, Cheryl, of the program. One is to have a deep internal shift and
Hmm.
awakening, like I did, to go from focusing on our external world as the
Hmm.
source of our problems and issues in life, and shifting that focus to ourselves and to our
Hmm.
internal world. And through that process, through that awakening and perspective, we have a deep healing and transformation of how we feel about ourselves on the inside.
Hmm.
So the symptoms of unhappiness are feeling lost and empty,
Hmm.
um, overwhelmed, the need to be perfect and be who you think you need to be for others,
Hmm.
feeling not enough, feeling anger, blame, and resentment, feeling
Hmm.
disconnected and unfulfilled. Um, that's the experience of being unhappy. So at the beginning of the program, we create a benchmark of where they're starting at with that experience of themselves
Hmm.
as unhappy and feeling bad about who they are on the inside. And by the end of the program, that has completely shifted. I just had
Hmm.
a student in last week, and we took out her benchmarks of where she was in the program. And she was someone when she started, she trusted me and she knew this was the right path for her, but she was really struggling with like, but
Mhm.
will this work for me? I know this
Mhm.
has worked for her, but you don't understand. Like, I'm really messed up on the inside. Like, I don't know if this will work for me.
Mhm.
And I started working with her in October, and through the holidays, sometimes the program takes a little longer than 10 weeks.
Mhm.
And we looked back at her benchmark and she was just in tears, happy tears, like,
Oh.
oh my gosh, I'm so sad for that person. I
Mm.
remember being that. I know that's me, but that's
Mhm.
not my experience anymore. And she just, the way she can articulate how she feels about herself now is
Mhm.
truly incredible. And that's the transformation that my students get through the program.
Mhm.
And then the second part, or I guess kind of third, um, is you also get a roadmap of how do you make the lifestyle change to be happy in your
Mhm.
life, which is just happiness is I only want to be me and I only want
Mhm.
the life I have, not because of who's in it or not, or what I
Mhm.
have or don't have, but based on how I feel about myself and having self-value. That doesn't happen in 10 weeks. Learning to be happy and expressing yourself as happy in your life is a
Mhm.
lifestyle change, like
Mhm.
deciding to get into shape and do the things for your body and what you eat and how you are active as a way of how you want to live your life. That's what happiness is. So the
Mhm.
program teaches the roadmap of how to make that lifestyle change and the one simple thing that my students need to be doing in their life after the course to
Mhm.
continue to build that relationship with themselves so that they can
Mhm.
be happy.
Excellent. So how can people get a hold of you?
Yes, so you can find me on my website,
Mhm.
ahappinesscourse.com or karynseitz.com.
Mhm.
And I'm also on YouTube. This is something that I'm very excited about this year is growing my YouTube channel. It's
Mhm.
um, small right now, but I'm excited to dive into it this year and grow on YouTube. So you can find me on YouTube at Karyn Seitz, the happiness expert.
Mhm. Mhm. Excellent. Wonderful. So, Karyn, thank you so much for being here today. This has been an amazing conversation and really a lot of fun and very enlightening, I must
Oh,
say.
good. Good. Well, thank you so much for having me, Cheryl, and giving me an opportunity to share with others.
Well, I really think the work you're doing is very valuable, and I think you can and are already helping a lot of people. But
Thank you.
I believe that getting the word out and having people listen to the message will really make a difference to a lot of people. And I
Thank
think
you.
if we could reach a lot more people, the world would be not only happier, but a much better place.
I think so too.
Everybody, thank you so much for listening. As always, I really appreciate you as well. And do check out Karyn's website. Do connect with her if you have any questions. I'm sure she would love to hear from you. And remember to flip the switch on the victim mentality and look deep inside yourself and learn how to like yourself, because it might sound a little bit scary at first, but I honestly think you're going to love what you discover. And that is the way of the FemiNinja.